Hey everyone, Suri here, and welcome back to another week of late season offense matches. While Dimitri's bonus week might be over, we are still in Water Month, which means he's still got plenty of time to test drive his remix. His update gave him a lot of new toys to play with. His weapon's tempo is a particularly strong effect, combining neatly with Atrocity's Guard and Pulse Smoke combo to shut down enemy specials. The post-combat heal does a great job of keeping him healthy through a series of fights, especially when combined with additional healing from supports like Gatekeeper and Attuned Peony, letting him use other options for his special and A slot. Godlike Reflexes is an excellent option for his special. Access to unpierceable damage reduction makes him very difficult to bring down, and it's easy for him to keep it charged thanks to Tempo and a Breath Seal. Prime is a great version of Distant Counter, with the right support, and Panic Smoke rounds out Atrocity's smoke spectrum perfectly. While the skill doesn't match Atrocity's range, Penalty Doubler combos extremely well with the debuffs. Gatekeeper is an exceptionally strong support for Dimitri. The extra combat stats and post-combat healing are great for any tank, but his Warp Bubble effect makes it much safer for a support to stay within 2 spaces of Dimitri to keep his weapon online. His ability to donate null follow-up to Dimitri is another useful bonus, and makes it much easier to bring Prime online. The 2 peonies provide the bulk of the extra support. Having 2 Soaring Guidances makes navigating maps trivial, and they can both donate 3 separate bonuses to Dimitri by dancing him. With 5 unique bonuses between them, on top of Gatekeeper's null follow-up and Dimitri giving himself Penalty Doubler, it's really easy to get Prime online from a safe distance. The extra layer of dodge and penalty neutralization help give Dimitri an edge in combat, and their cross-map stat and healing support is invaluable. Milla and Dash round out the team's mythics. While their sabotage support isn't as valuable once Atrocity comes into play, it can help Dimitri win his first combat to get his own debuffs applied. Milla's cross-map stat support and isolation are always useful too, and Ash escalates the team's mobility options to a frankly absurd level. Now that we've gone over the team, let's get to the first match. This match was a fun one early in the week. While it isn't a particularly tricky setup, the 2 save armors can make it difficult to approach, and a Pathfinder-enabled Brave Crom can easily find his way into areas of the map that you weren't expecting him to reach. Yune does a decent job of enabling their maxed-out Summer Claw, too, whose impact and Fallen Star can make him a difficult opponent to handle in the enemy phase. Relying on his opponent's penalties to enable his multi-hit weapon can be a bit tricky in Dark Season, so thanks to Peony, who can shut all of those penalties down on any target he attacks. Using Triandra as their 7th slot unit doesn't really help much either, since it limits the team's options for actually being able to catch up to any hit-and-run approaches. We're not planning on anything fancy for this, though. We're just going to move Dimitri in, make sure he's got all of his buffs from both peonies, and plant him in range of the entire enemy team. Set Gatekeeper behind him to make sure he's got an ally within 2 spaces, and say go. Yune moves in first. He doesn't have Godlike Reflexes online yet, which means she can almost break through the post-combat healing he gets from himself and Gatekeeper. And the DR Pierce he has means that Yune can't actually survive that first hit. Note moving in next when she does 0 damage in combat is not a good sign for the rest of their team. At this point, it's mostly just because the rest of her team has a lot more health than she does. Rhea moves in here. She does actually get to do a chunk of damage, even though she's not showing any visible damage on the forecast, thanks to her weapons doing res-based true damage. With all of the DR that Dimitri has, though, it just doesn't do much. And then we just keep carving our way through the enemy team. The Winter Black Knight does get to reach us here thanks to the Boot Seal, but even he's not really going to be able to do much here. And then we finish with Claude. He's not quite as threatening as his Windy version is. And since Triandra locks herself out as the 7th unit, we don't have to worry about ending the match before we pick up this Aether pot. We can send Gatekeeper in to do this. Since the heavy trap isn't real, it makes it a lot simpler to just dance him,
Of course.
claim the pot, and move Dimitri in for the finish.
Greetings.
Yes.
The week's matches had been pretty quiet before I ran into this one. They have a really intimidating setup here, combining multiple rally traps with Katria and Elise to ruin most tanking strategies. The maxed out Cornelia is a treat to see, and the ploys from both her and Plumeria cover nearly the entire map. Her ability to sabotage Flash can also make positioning very awkward. Combined with Dogger's tendency to rally Elise, the team can easily gain access to an unprepared backliner, especially with 2 dancers on the field to press the assault. I had to really think about a good way to approach this. Letting Elise attack Dimitri is not a good idea, since he can't do much to flash effects without an LC disrupt.
I'll comply.
So, we use guidance to hop over the mountain, and go after Elise to start things off. The donated Kanto means that he can move back, and into range of the other peony being able to dance him, which also lets Gatekeeper pull her to safety, and lets Dimitri move over to tank the rest of their team. By moving all the way back like this, we stay out of reach of Dogger even after she rallies forward, and I don't have to worry about Plumeria dancing since she can reach Dimitri, and the true damage from exposure means that she'll never actually dance. Cornelia moves in first, but the half-charged godlike reflexes means that Dimitri doesn't really have any holes in his damage reduction for her to try and work through. Plumeria moves next, and while the DR is a bit desynchronized for the second hit, it still just isn't enough to get too much damage to stick. From here, Triandra dances, but we've pulled our dancers out of her range, and all she can go after is Dimitri. Which happens after Katria, who just can't get anything done here. Dogger goes in next with one last triangle attack, but at this point the team is starting to run out of firepower, and can't even outpace Dimitri's healing. Which means that when Embla moves in, she really only succeeds in healing him back to full health. It was a really successful first turn, and from here, all we need to do is make sure we grab these 2 Aether pots before we close out the match. Thankfully, the ridiculous level of mobility this team has means that we actually can pull that off this turn. Moving in and breaking the first Aether pot with the first peony's dance means that we can have Ash let the second peony work forward, give Gatekeeper a second dance,
Yes.
and then have Dimitri close out the match. This match was another fun one to run into. Their team has a great mix of threats to worry about, most notably the Tea-Time Sigurd. While being the 7th unit does mean he isn't immediately active, he threatens enough of the map to do a great job of enabling Sue's rally trap, while also being the primary target for Plumeria's dance. With Triandra following that by dancing Sue, the 2 of them can break through just about any tank, especially once Sigurd's special lets Lind, Yune, and Embla pile on afterwards. Lind also does a great job of letting them get through any flared Sparrow users, and the null follow-up can do a lot to help Sue break through any follow-up denial she runs into. I decide to go in and tank this from a bit of a forward position,
Good morning.
and I actually intended to have Gatekeeper end up moving into this tile right below the tactic room after he tests this bolt trap.
I'll
I
comply.
did end up outthinking myself a bit here and had Gatekeeper break the tactic room to make sure he wouldn't get hit by a gravity effect next turn, but unfortunately that also means that he's able to be attacked by Lind, which may not have ended as well as I'd like for him. So we just end up having Dimitri tank their enemy team, with only half of his weapon online. Lind moving in first is a pretty good sign. While she does have half Pierce, it does mean that he's not going to be taking more damage from that from any of the following attacks. And, since he does have a penalty neutralization bonus and is 2 spaces away from his allies, Yune doesn't have anywhere near as much damage, or damage reduction, as she might usually have access to. Emblem moves in next. She has less health to lose than Sue or Plumeria, and also doesn't let godlike reflexes fully recharge thanks to the guard effect. Without tempo, it doesn't cycle quite as cleanly as I'd like, and means that it's not available for this one hit from Plumeria. But even with all of that, their team still can't quite outpace his healing, and at this point he's just healing for more damage than they can do. And we don't have to worry about any dances, since, a lot like the last match, exposure makes sure that none of the dancers will dance as long as they can attack Dimitri instead. And isolating Triandra doesn't hurt either. And then we end the round with Sue, who can't actually outspeed Dimitri. Slight slip-up aside, the first turn went really well, and now we just need to make sure we reach these 2 ether pots in the top right corner before we close things out. The gravity does a lot to make sure that Sigurd isn't going to reach anyone we don't want him to, but since we have Gatekeeper running into a hex trap here, we're not going to be able to close things out this turn.
Your orders.
So we just pin Dimitri into his corner, move everybody else in behind them,
Well,
and trust that Dimitri will survive a turn of combat with Sigurd, even without an ult follow-up, before we close things out. He does hit pretty hard, and the auto follow-up does let him get a second hit in, with a lot less damage reduction involved. But it's not really enough to put Dimitri in any real trouble. And it's easy enough to close things out from there.
of course.
Gatekeeper can pick up both of these ether pots,
Where to today?
and we can move Dimitri in to close out the match,
comply.
and get himself all the way back to full HP after the fight. This match was a great way to close out the week. While it isn't as aggressive as the previous couple of setups, this team is significantly more difficult to attack into, especially after the first turn. Citrine is an excellent centerpiece for the squad, giving all 7 of them access to On Guard, Rally Spectrum, Triangle Attack, Formation, and stat bonuses, along with pre-charging an AoE special to crack open any stubborn tanks. Dimitri and Corrin are a great pair of frontliners, giving the team a second line of defense against any ranged hit-and-run strategies, while also being a formidable wall for any melee approaches. And, as usual, Katria just offers the team a lot of firepower for breaking apart any tanking
Your
strategies.
orders.
I decide to get going on the first turn here. While it isn't too easy to attack into the team and then get back out, we don't really have to worry about that if we aren't planning on having Dimitri retreat. So, after we get all of his bonuses online, and break through the front line of structures, we just reposition him forward, and attack into the enemy Dimitri, who doesn't really have such a good time dealing with his freshly remixed legendary self. And from there, the entire team is already debuffed and penalty doublers online, and we have a defense tile to play with, so we just plump Dimitri here and say go. I don't have to worry about the match ending this turn, since Gatekeeper is stopping Triandra from actually warping forward to attack him, which means he can just focus on weathering the storm and taking down the rest of her team. Robin is the first victim. While the Ignis might have been able to do a chunk of damage if it had landed, the combination of tempo and guard smoke and pulse smoke means that he doesn't have a chance to do that. And, since he attacked before Citrine, he doesn't even get a chance to use this blazing special to try and get some damage to stick. And it really is all downhill from there. Medius doesn't even have a triangle attack to use, even if he was able to do damage to Dimitri in the first place. And a panicked Corrin without access to her Dragon Vein is just not going to have a very good time of this fight. I did deliberately leave Triandra able to dance instead of isolating her with Milla, which means that Katria moves in, gets danced, and gets herself knocked out at the end of this turn. It's a nice clean first turn. We knocked out almost their entire team in one go, and gave herself just enough time to reach both of these Aether pots before we close out the match. Repositioning Gatekeeper means that we can get the first one easily, and smiting Dimitri over to the right means that he doesn't have to worry about the traps, and can just pick up the second Aether pot from the bottom tile,
I'll comply.
with support behind him to make sure it's nice and easy to tank Triandra and close out the week. I had a great time with Dimitri this week. As much fun as it is to see him with bonus week stats, it's encouraging to see him do this well even without them. He's in a really strong place at the moment, and I'm hoping to see him in action for a long time to come. As a heads up, the usual videos will see a bit of an interruption for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to be out of town for Thanksgiving and won't have a chance to record or edit anything for the next couple of seasons. Things should get back on track after that, though. I do have a Discord channel if you'd like to hang out and chat. There's a link in the description, and I've also got a Patreon link there if you'd like to help support the channel. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the video, good luck with your own matches, and I'll see you next time.